Welcome to episode 403 of We Don't Die Radio. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the #1 international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, our home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can always find our free Sunday gathering every week, 2 p.m. New York time, with medium demonstration included. Also, we have so many upcoming live events, medium classes, and so much more. So that's at wedon'tdie.com. Now, here's a question for you. What if our children were taught about life, death, and the afterlife at a young age and embraced the fact that we are more than our bodies and that we're really divine souls having a human experience? Well, our guest today is Marie Antoinette Kelley, author of the brand new children's book called Danny's Day in Heaven, inspired by one of our good friends and previous guests, Dannion Brinkley. She is also an award-winning artist who has done hundreds of commissioned portraits, as well as the art for the Angel Quest Oracle cards. There's so much more to her, but we'll let her tell you in her own words. To find out more about her and her beautiful work, visit makfineart.com. Marie Antoinette, a warm welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me, Sandra. I so appreciate being here.
We both get excited, I know, anytime
Yes.
someone new, we can't help it. So sit back, relax between you and me and our listener and our viewer. Just imagine that we are, just sitting on a couch together. And for anyone listening, if you would rather see us, just go to YouTube, type in We Don't Die Radio 403, and you can see our beautiful guest. So my friend, I'm so happy to have you here. Talking about children and children's books is very rare when you talk about the afterlife. So could you tell us a little bit about you, maybe where you live, and a little bit about your story that would have you create such a beautiful, beautiful book?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Sandra. At the present time, I live at the northern boundary of Yellowstone Park in a valley called Paradise Valley. So it's quite natural to feel inspired about heavenly things here. It's so beautiful. I didn't always live here. I am from the Netherlands. I grew up in Europe. And when I was a child, that's kind of where the whole story started, because I was a child that was afraid of death. And had a lot of questions and experiences with things I couldn't explain. And nobody really knew how to, set that right in my world. And so I think those unanswered questions kind of left me feeling like death was a black hole that could gobble people up. And it made me more afraid of it than I needed to be. And I felt all my, long story short, I got around to this point, but I've always felt that it's helpful for a child to know the truth of what happens when we die, so they don't have to have the experience that I had.
How early on did you start realizing that it's more to life than meets the eye? Was it when you became an adult?
Oh, the answers were coming, you mean? Yeah, I'm always knew, there was always questions and experiences. And yes, when I was an adult, I started the quest pretty hard of like, what are the answers? What are the insights? I have a natural spiritual bent, and I studied most of the world's religions and really just got deep into the language of God, I like to call it. And at some point, my husband and I made friends with Dannion Brinkley, the author of Saved by the Light. And he's I don't know for your listeners who don't know him, he's someone who's had one of the most complete near-death experiences on record. And he wrote that best-selling book. When he came out to Montana, we made friends with him, but I got to hear his story firsthand, and having that empirical evidence that we don't die, and how it's really going down, and what happens to your soul, and how you transition pretty much from your physical existence to your spiritual self. That was just so reassuring to me, and it just validated everything that I intuitively had known but never could set right in my world. So that was a breakthrough for me, and at that point I knew there was the material that I needed to present to children. And so Dannion's story, the first one of many, because at this point, I think 1 in 25 Americans have some experience with near death. So the statistics are really revealing that it's a hidden topic I think we need to talk about. And so I told Daniel, I want to talk about your story because everybody talks about it for adults, but nobody for children. And so I said, of course, Daniel himself, he got struck by lightning. And I know that I couldn't translate that story literally because, speaking to children, you have to come from the perspective of a child while staying true to the subject. And I couldn't have a child be struck by lightning and recover in 30 pages. So I made some small adaptations, but stayed true within his findings and the findings of people that have had near-death experiences around the world.
Would you tell
And
us
so
the story?
yeah, so I did. I have the book here. I can show you.
Yes,
But
Danny's
there's
Day in Heaven.
I have
I've
the
read it. I
painting
have.
next to it.
And you did
Oh,
the
good.
artwork. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course
I
I.
did the artwork for it too. And so yeah, so I turned Daniel into a 12-year-old, and he actually provided me a photo of a sixth grade class. So I have because I'm an artist, I turned that into a portrait. So people could connect his story with the story that I presented. But he's a 12-year-old boy in there, and this 12-year-old boy is a bully on the beach, and he gets caught in a storm, and then that storm drags him underwater, and he drowns. And in that drowning, he transitions to the other side, and he goes through the steps that most people who have a near-death experience go through before he gets returned to his body and resuscitated on the beach.
Well,
So
that's
children get a glimpse into the process of what happens when we die and how life really doesn't end at death at all.
that is the condensed form.
Yes,
Marie
very
Antoinette.
condensed. Yeah, I didn't know
But
if you wanted me to give it away or not.
you can, well, I think you can give it away. And the reason
Okay.
I say that is
Yeah.
because who buys children's books are parents. And
Yeah.
so it's unlikely that you're going to get a little kid to listen to this. And
Yeah.
I really would like listeners and viewers to know maybe a little bit about Danny
Yeah.
before he had this experience and what kind of things happened. Because like I said, I've read your book, and there are so many things that are consistent with so many near death experiences because who he was before, and let's face it,
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
all know kids that are a little tough. Maybe they're a little bit of a bully and all that. And I know from the adults, and I've interviewed, I don't even know, over 100 adults that have had near death experiences, they come out a changed person. They come
Hmm.
out a person who wants to help, who wants to share, who wants to serve, who want people to live a better life. So our little 12-year-old boy, Danny, goes through something
Yes.
similar. So if you don't mind just sharing a
Yeah.
little bit more, because it's a very easy read. The
Hmm.
message is profound, and I do think parents watching or grandparents, this would make a beautiful gift for if there's a child in your life.
Well, thank you for mentioning that how people are left changed by the near-death experience, because that is a very important point. And I think the message got condensed for me. What I wanted to present is that you don't have to be good to get into heaven. And Daniel was the first one who really brought that message home for me, because he was a self-described bad guy at the time that he had this near-death experience. He had been in the army. He had done the ugly things that, you have to do sometimes when you're in the army. He also grew up in the Bible Belt, and he said if anyone was deserving of what he had taught as is hell, then it was me. And he never went anywhere near it because there was no such part in his experience. So I translated that very important message to Danny being a bully, because kids have to deal with those kind of scenarios in school. Kids are just not, they don't have the kindness of their heart open. And so Danny is that bully, and just like the message I just mentioned, he gets into heaven because the whole discussion that I'm hoping that it will open up for parents and children is that it's not a bargaining system. You don't have to barter. It's about how you express yourself, and what you have in your heart is really love and potential for creation and kindness. And that is kind of the message that he gets from the other side when he is bathed in that light and that unconditional love and that total support and brilliance of the other side. He wakes up to the idea that he hasn't been a nice person. He gets to see his life review like people do once they have passed. And in that life review, he sees that he didn't share any kindness didn't create happiness, and he feels ashamed and embarrassed of himself. And it's, again, not from a place of punishment or, you know, dogma even. It's from that awakening to what he could have done with himself. He sees the potential, and he knows how kind he can be, what's hidden in the secrets of his heart, and he knows what, you know, really is behind that now that he's stepped into the spiritual dimension. And so he wakes up to that power, and when he comes back, he is committed to a path of creating love, creating good, and, you know, bringing happiness.
Beautiful story. Yeah. Beautiful story, beautiful book. And at the end, you've got some questions that can open up
Yeah.
conversations between parents. Can you talk about why you put those questions in there?
Well, yeah, and that's brings up another point of the book, is like you said, there's many layers to this book, even though it's a concise and quick read. But one part of the book is, you know, I put the piece in that I just mentioned, that it's not behavior related per se to get into heaven. It's more our own state of being that resonates with the love on the other side. The other part is that I didn't make it a book that decides for you what your spirituality or your religion should be, because people that are devout Christians, they will have an experience of Jesus on the other side, and people that are Buddhists will have an experience corresponding to their philosophy on the other side, because the nature of spirit we find is unconditionally supportive, and so it supports you where you are in your discoveries of truth. And so the book is not deciding for you what your philosophy or your religion is within the life that you're living with your kids. It's just it's sticking to the facts of the experience. But like I said, all these people around the world that have had near-death experiences, scientists have begun to study those experiences, and they've boiled it down to common denominators, such as most people experience a tunnel in which they through which they travel to enter a world of brilliant light that is unconditionally loving, that is overwhelmingly beautiful and euphoric for them. And then at that point, most of them meet a being of light who guides them or who receives them, and they have their life review in which they get to see the results of their own actions, not just their own actions, but also as seen and experienced through the eyes of the people they have affected. And that's really where it hits home, how they participated in their life. And they find that there is no judge for it other than an awakening within themselves of what they've done and what was possible. And so then after that, the guide is still, you know, helping Danny process that, at which point he gets introduced to some people that he loved while on Earth and lost. And they are already on the other side, and he gets to meet them, which is also a feature but it's an element that happens to people. They obviously, as you know, and many people already know, you get to meet whom you loved and find out that you never really lost them. And he gets to meet his pup as well. And so after all that, his heart's pretty full, and you know, he gets sent back. He, like most people with an NDE, he doesn't want to go back because the difference in vibration is stunning. And you know, everything on Earth at that point feels to most people a little sluggish, like they're in some sort of molasses, and it feels like they have to make a real decision to go back. And so he gets, you know, that choice. And for them, for him, it's a choice as well, but it's a choice that he can now create something that he will be proud of, and make this world a better place, like we all want to do.
That's
So
beautiful.
for that reason, there's so many elements in it. And then the questions, I can only imagine that children who read this have, you know, a million questions on any one of those angles, you know, who are you going to meet, to what is it like, and how does that fit into what we believe in? And so it's wrong for me to say this is how it is. In fact, I struggled with that for a long time in the creation of this book, because I felt the weight of accountability, because for children, you want to be pure and you want to be honest. And I obviously had that intention very deeply, but I struggled with the idea as an artist, who was I to interpret what it would look like on the other side for them? And for years, I was like, it's not good enough. And it's, you know, all the critics inside of me were like, this is not really, I haven't seen it. And I was struggling with my literal rational mind, trying to say it must be perfect. And I had to grow through that process with the same kind of gentleness that, you know, anyone who touches the other side gets coached with. And I realized it wasn't so much about what I painted as it was about how it felt, because it's the feeling of the book that is going to invite you to remember and resonate with it so that you can open up to what you know is true for you in your heart. And that obviously is a place of discussion because you want to share that with your children, and your children will, I think all of us have the other side of us is a spiritual nature. And so we all have experiences, whether we have articulated them or not. And hopefully this book prompts you to begin those discussions. And that's what the questions are designed to facilitate.
Yeah, it's not just your words, it's the beautiful paintings that are within it, the pictures, the portraits. And I think it's a good conversation to have with kids because what may be surprising to people is that there's a lot of young kids that know things. They have a psychic
Mhm.
nature. I've done episodes about this and talked to people about this, that young children come into this life and very often say things like, I know I met a man who said that the child had said to the mom, you now have, you don't have curly hair or something like that. When I picked you to be my mom, you had curly hair. And both, and glasses, I think it was. And the parents are looking at each other like this child couldn't possibly know that. So the woman had worn glasses in the past, and she also had a permanent. And they said, but we've never discussed that. How would they know? And there's also children that talk about um, people in the afterlife that they remember. And I've really done a bunch of talks on this, on actually on my new show, Shades of the Afterlife. And so that there's this knowingness with a lot of children. And I think at a certain age, when things start going wrong in our life, like I was 4 years old, my first bad experience, and I was lost at Disneyland. I had bad vision. Nobody knew. I was probably just lost for a few seconds. But in my world, that was very real. And kids start having experiences that their ego kicks in. They're not good enough, they're not smart enough, all that stuff. And so I think that this psychic sense, our soul instinct, and all that gets shut down. So I think, Marie Antoinette, to be able to have these conversations, it might spark something within children that it's okay to talk about this, don't you think?
Absolutely. And that's definitely my hope of the book as well, because besides, I like how you articulated that, but I also believe that the natural process of growing up, the development of the rational mind kicks in around your teenage years, and that's the left brain. And before that, the right brain is the part of you as an artist that have come to understand it much better, because I was trained as a scientist first, and my left brain got really strong over my life, especially probably my ego kicked in. It was a defense mechanism to keep things safe and understand them. Because the more I understood it, the more safe I would feel. But I think that rational mind is a bit of an enemy to that belief that you can touch spirit, and to the experience of spirit and the afterlife, as you said it. And I think that's the natural ingredient in children, because they don't have that yet. They're just pure intuitive, you know, beings that just absorb and participate without that harsh questioning that develops as they get older. Now, not to say that that isn't an important skill. The rational mind needs to be there and really be functional. But I believe if children are taught from the beginning that this is a valid experience, and that there's a place for it, and that that place is experienced not just by them but by millions of people around the world, and that is actually proof of it now, that it finds a place that holds its own while they develop their rational mind. So I think that's the best of both worlds, because then you have access to the right and the left brain, and you're just more of a whole person. You can navigate the challenges of life based on all of who you are, rather than what society approves or what you're taught. And I hope that is going to contribute a little bit to a stronger generation that isn't so overwhelmed by the existentialism of our current society that is
Talk a
so
little
bleak
bit
at times.
Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that. What's possible, do you think, with kids having that education and also that knowing that there's a bigger picture, that a life after death is real, but their life is important? What do you think?
Well, what I've found is in my own experience, because obviously I'm not a researcher, but relating it to how I've grown, is that once you have access to both sides of your brain and you understand spirit as a natural part of your life, things get easier because I think spirit is, first of all, the voice of inspiration. So even if you're struggling through a math exam or some science project, when that inspiration is present, you could literally get an answer just like that, or a pathway through the challenges in your head. And so it makes things whole for people. I think it brings insight and perfection. And plus, I also have seen, how hard it is for people to lose their loved ones when they think it's the end of life, when there's nothing left. It's such a hard-hitting loss that this person is now done. And when you realize through your own experience, not because someone tells you, that this person is merely transitioned, and like energy is neither created or destroyed, it's transformed into a new consciousness of love, light, and they're still themselves on the other side, and they can connect and send soothing messages or just love through their hearts. That grief and that bleakness diminishes, because I personally believe that grief is the language of the body as it learns to let go of physical experiences, but that within our spirit there is no grief. There's connection, there's communication, there's love. And when that finds a place in your life, these hard edges of our life that we all experience, they soften. And I feel that grace enters to help us feel happier and feel more connected and fulfilled.
Can I share a story about you, about a boy I heard of that had drowned and had a near-death experience?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I just have to cough for 1 second. Hang
No
on.
problem.
Go ahead. Yes, I'd love to hear it.
I was on an airplane sitting next to
Mhm.
a gentleman, and one thing led to another. We got some wine. We just talk, 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 talk. And I ended up telling him about my book and my research. And, with big eyes, he thought, oh, I can tell you my story. He
Mm.
had two sons, or he has two sons. They're both very much alive. But when they were young, one of them was being taught how to use the bathroom, and the other one really wanted to go swimming. They were at some public park. And so the older boy, who must have been maybe 5 years old, can't quite remember, was right behind the dad. They were at one of the portal potties as the youngest one was trying to use the bathroom. And the little boy really wanted to go swimming, but he didn't know how to swim. So the father, unfortunately, took his eyes off the 5-year-old just long enough, and he turns and his boy is floating in the water. Tried to swim, couldn't breathe in the water. So things happened quick. He ended up being resuscitated, went to the hospital. And when the dad was there with him in the hospital, the boy said, I was never afraid, Daddy. He said, the big face in the sun was with me. And he described floating up to this place and being with the big face in the sun. And he
That's
said,
so sweet.
this big face told him that he's going back to be with Daddy.
Hmm.
That's where he needed to be. And of course, he's
Hmm.
saying this in all children's language. And
Hmm.
the gentleman on the airplane, believe it or not, I think at this point when I was talking to him, the boy was now like 18.
Yeah.
This father has felt guilt all of his life for that
Wow.
boy, that happening. I said, well, let me ask you a question. How is your boy today? Well, all he does is help other people. So he's turned
Wow.
into a giver.
Hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
able to have a conversation with the father to let go of the guilt, that he did the best he could.
Yeah.
But based on this near-death experience, the
That's
boy
so
has
beautiful.
really turned into a giver. And I just thought,
I love that.
the big face in the sun.
That's so sweet. I know. I love that. And I feel that the big face in the sun, anything of a spiritual nature, anything, it's really whatever people connect with, because they have so many unique experiences. It's always about comfort and reassurance. I have never had a person tell me that what they ran into when they connected with spirit was condescending, condemning, or negative. And so guilt is never a natural voice from that side of our experience. It's always from the physical perspective of what we have done wrong that creeps in. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was in the airplane too, flying home, and I got to sit in, some a spot by myself without my family. And so I connected with the guy next to me, and he was a young guy, military man. And as I was sitting next to him, I started feeling more and more proud of him and everything he represented and what he did. But it got to the point that I felt like, okay, I don't really think this is my feelings because I was just introduced to him. And, he's asking such nice questions. And I was just proud of this really wonderful, well-educated, well-mannered person that he was. And I said to him, I said, I don't know if it's appropriate for you, but I feel like I'm proud of you on behalf of somebody that you have lost, because I just feel like, could it be your grandfather or your grandmother? He goes, well, I've lost them both. I said, well, I don't want to make it up, but I really feel just such pride in you, because you're doing what your family has always been good at, like it's a family lineage. So I started telling him how I felt towards him, and how honorable and full of integrity he came across, and how much of a strong person, and how much his contribution to society would mean. I said, and I feel that this information comes from somebody that has the same name as you. And he says, well, I carry the middle name of my grandfather, and he was also a military man. And so we connected with all of that. And I realized that's the kind of effortless connection that we rationalize away when we say, okay, I'm proud of him, but I'm just affected by his story, and we diminish it. What was really happening is a little glimpse of someone that cared very deeply for this boy, young man, who was looking for anyone who would be receptive to get that message across, because it wasn't really not about me at all, but it was that I was able to feel it. And because I had just written this book about Danny's Day in Heaven, realizing, death is not real, it's just a doorway. I was able to trust it and pass it on to him. And it turned into a wonderful experience. We made great friends on the plane, and he felt the meaning of that message from his grandfather. And he didn't doubt it either, because people do know in their hearts that life is not really ending with death. It's as we know it, it ends. And so there's a place for grief. I'm not diminishing that, but there's something new that they can switch over to. And these messages come through in unexpected moments when we're willing to just accept them and listen, and not judge ourselves or make ourselves feel guilty, or push it away. Do you agree?
I agree. What a
Yeah.
beautiful story. I think that is our soul nature, and part of that
Hmm.
is communication and is that flow. I want to talk to you a little bit about imagination, because we live in 2023 right now. And
Hmm.
I see little kids, and they're on iPads and iPhones and
Yeah.
stuck to the television. And I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to critique anybody's parenting at all. But I do feel that the imagination, being outdoors, say, being writing and coloring and, with hands and things like that. Do you think that in this day and age, maybe just talk about the importance of imagination? That might be a better way of putting it. And because you being an
Oh,
artist,
absolutely. Yes,
what's
I'm
important?
100% on board. I am a parent. I'm a grandparent now, and
No.
I'm not highly in favor of, yeah, I am. I'm not highly in favor of phones. My son, he's just turned 17, and I raised all my kids with the awareness of what phones can do. But I think, honestly, and this sounds harsh, but I think your phone will steal your life, because it'll never stop running out of little reels or videos. It'll never say you've had enough, go to bed. It's up to us to set these boundaries. And it's the same with our imagination. It'll fill it in for you with images from other people and feelings from other people. And I'm really strongly feeling that is selling us short. I believe our imagination is hugely critical. I think, a faculty of the right brain, which is where I feel we make our first connections until we really connect with our spirit. It's like, for me, like the way to connect with that side of yourself that then, of course, takes on a stronger life and momentum. But I think the rational brain, the left brain, is the one that helps us navigate the objective part of our reality through science in this world, and that the right brain, the imagination and the feeling-based part of our brain, helps us navigate the irrational, the intuitive side, the spiritual side of our life. And I feel the imagination is critical to developing that voice. And I think the difference between imagination and spiritual experience, or virtual reality, I suppose I'm trying to say, with what's in the computer, what's in the phones presented to people, is that it doesn't have your feelings associated with it. You're getting, bombarded with feelings from other people that kind of shape you. But as I kind of navigate that myself, I think imagination is when you go out and you play in the beach and you study your insects and you bring yourself out, your imagination takes off, your own feelings generated and your own feelings get educated. And I have noticed through my own experiences that it's the feelings that allow me to translate messages from the other side. So this is the simple one I was just telling about that grandfather, and the fact that I could hear that, he had the same name as his boy he was so proud of. That was a feeling. That wasn't a fact that was, coming into my brain. And so I've learned that it's feelings. And when I paint portraits very often. I get messages from people that are deceased, and they're always writing in on the feelings. And I think that gets developed through our imagination. So as children, I think it's critical that we develop that skill so that we can be equipped to let spirit be a part of our lives.
Incredible. We do almost weekly medium classes with our friends Carrie McLeod and Phil Dykes. And in the basic, which is teaching how our souls communicate through our psychic sense, they talk this very first thing about feelings. So many people think you're going to get some picture or somebody's going to talk to you. But it is paying attention to just those ever so gentle feelings. And then certainly other things can work from that. I was thinking, all of a sudden I just lost my train of thought. I was so in the feeling world. Where was I going? It was somewhere good. It was something to do with the iPhones. Oh, yes, I know. Our technology, the iPhones, the smartphones, all those things. Like you said, there's never ending information, and you're hearing other people's feelings. And the things that go viral are usually negative things. And nobody on one of those devices is telling us, you're great, you're good enough, you're smart, you're wonderful, every dream is possible. All these empowering things, nobody's saying it, right? It's all the negative. So
I've actually, in all fairness, I have found a few streams where they are more positive now. And so that sometimes it is actually ending up inspiring me, which made me feel like, all right, I have to soften my opinion. There's a good side to everything. Yes. It's just the balance of it, really.
Yeah, I didn't mean to misspeak there.
No, I know. In all fairness,
But
I can hear my kids.
A lot of kids consuming is not that.
I agree.
Not that. So what else can parents do with kids to maybe set aside the phone and things that can engage their imagination? You said go, we used to collect bugs and same thing like that.
Yeah.
But what other things or what other talks?
Well, that's how I did. I mean, that is one of the reasons the questions are in the back of the book. It's to generate, curiosity, because there isn't like, okay, goal setting, now do this. It's now do this or do that, and you'll find this or that. But it's a lifestyle. And I ended up homeschooling my kids until they were in high school, when they really just wanted to be in the social scene. And in the years before that, the free flow of life and following its clues is just so much fun, to be able to let life kind of offer you opportunities and then follow the clues like a treasure hunt. We did a lot of imagination. I think for little kids, it's priceless to have a world with fairies or, nature spirits, gnomes, and just get your hands in nature and let, like a Lord of the Rings style, let's get yourself or Narnia style. But the idea that, the questions, I suppose, I don't really know what's right or for you, but I do know that allowing a child to live by his own rhythm and then following his questions and his imagination was a real priceless gift that I was able to, have for my kids, because we were able to homeschool, taking it a little bit out of the pressures of, society with the schedule of 9 to 5 and all that. And you need room for these things. I mean, the more stress you have, the less you will feel that you can express that side. But I do believe that spirit is to matter as yin is to yang. So I think if you find a place where you relax and you just let go of all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, that part of you wakes up naturally, whether it's in your kids or in yourself. You know it. You know that in the softer moments of life, there it is. And, your curiosity will take you deeper into it.
Which brings up a good point. We're talking about kids and we're talking about a children's book, but every one of us watching right now is a kid at heart, aren't we? It's
Mhm.
never too late, is it?
No, no, totally. And that's what been my journey because, like I said, as a child, I was really afraid of all of that in it because it was just overwhelming me. And I can now understand that being in a state of fear about my spiritual experiences, made me attract scarier experiences because my whole vibration of fear would attract scary things in the first place. And so that kept it gloomier and heavier than it needs to be because I raised my own kids now and now my grandkids. And I know that when there is no fear around the subject, they're naturally curious for the whole spectrum of experiences. They don't end up in the scary things. It isn't like a world of, ghosts and hands coming at you in the dark like it was for me. It was really intimidating. And so for them, it's curiosity that translates to premature wisdom, actually, because my girls, when they were in high school, they lost several of their friends. I live in an area where there is some real difficulty with the teenagers, and there end up being some suicides almost yearly, and it's a devastating problem in this area. And I remember my girls, while they struggled with making sense of it, like any teen would, it immediately brought out some wisdom in them that they could then share with their friends, and it gave them strength to navigate really difficult things. And it wasn't because they had, you know, answers per se, but it's because they allowed in their childhood years, you know, mysteries to be part of their life, and the other side of our own language, the inner spiritual language, to find a place. And so that was naturally part of them in their teenage years, where most teenagers lose, faith in almost everything at that time. It's a very cynical part of life and a very cynical phase in life, and that makes it so hard. So um, I feel for children to have, that connection, exploration out of, a fun, playful curiosity. That's one of the reasons I tried to make this children's book really colorful, not just because everybody who says the other side is full of colors we haven't even seen, and they're so alive. Also because it makes it even more interesting and inviting to find out what is this world, how do I see it peek through in my life.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your artwork. When did you really get into art? Because you are a fine artist. You do beautiful,
Well, thanks.
beautiful work, beautiful work. And how did that develop within you?
Well, I actually credit that to spirit, which is one of the reasons I believe spirit brings perfection. Because I was a science after I was um, a student, I became a science student, and I actually got a national. I grew up in the Netherlands, switched to America college here, and I got a national scholarship, the Goldwater Scholarship for science. And I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Because it was beginning to create a path for me that was really science oriented, but there was this other side inside of me that was just calling out for attention. And I ended up ending my career with that scholarship rather than having it open up a whole world for me. And so then I went through like identity crisis, like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing with myself? And I had my two girls at that time. And as I was raising them, I couldn't find any answers. Who am I? What am I supposed to do with myself? It was just chaos inside of me. But I kept studying and getting more information, this time on the spiritual path, still using my science mind to kind of approach my spirituality. And then one day my neighbor was moving and she gave me a video cassette. This is about 2 decades ago now. And she said, um, I know you're trying to homeschool your girls, so would you like this for them? And I looked at the video cassette and it said, yes, you can draw. And it was a right brain method for how to get into art. And I looked at it, I never watched the video. I looked at it, I said, I used to draw as a teenager. So I actually went home and I picked up a pencil and I outspilled these portraits out of my hand. There was this one after the next. It was like some door got opened up inside of me, and there came this this developed skill. And I was like, what? And it was so funny because beyond portraits, I really couldn't sketch a barn or a landscape or anything. So it was, again, just something that got like woken up inside of me, but it did start. It was so funny because at that point it was 1999, I believe, and it was at that time that just websites were becoming a thing. So I taught myself, some code, and I made a first website, and I put a line on there. Funny how my name is Marie Antoinette, and here I am drawing nothing but heads. And I left that tagline behind since then, but it was just like a little bit of humor about it. But I was always so stunned. But at the same time, it really brought me to my innermost being, where I just love people, and I love them because of the complexity of their spirit and just the beauty of their souls. And that is the language I love most beyond any language that I've learned. And when I draw a portrait, that's where it takes me, not so much the of course I capture their hair and their features, but it's the spirit that they represent. Each has a unique one. And that love that I feel for the subject has then made me have spiritual experiences with them, especially if they've already passed away. I've had some really magnificent moments that heal me, that teach me, as well as the person I'm painting for. Excuse me. And so it's deepened my spirituality in a really, an experiential way. Like I've been able to find the truth of, even though I haven't had a traditional near-death experience, the truth of the afterlife is just rock solid within my being based on the experiences I've had. And I've come to understand you don't have to die to know that the afterlife's real, or that spirit has a language that's part of your life. It's just, you have to open up to it. And it's available to all of us.
I want people to learn without having to have a
Yeah.
near-death experience too.
Yes.
It's so beautiful how you told your story. Have you ever drawn images of people that you see in the afterlife?
Well, I have a pet peeve where I really would like to capture who they are, so that when you look at someone, you don't think, oh yeah, that reminds me of them, but it really is them. Excuse me, I have something in my throat. Can I just cough for a second?
No problem.
I didn't mean to do that, but I think it's just some allergies in the air.
It's okay. I can edit that part.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I feel it's kind of like, how when you have to call somebody, you don't dial a phone number that's almost the same. You dial a phone number that is their number so that you can get them. And I feel that like our fingerprints, there's such a unique code about each and every one of us. So if I don't have a photograph or the person with me, then I feel like I can't get their exact essence. And so while I have tuned into people and they have come to me in dreams even to connect, to give me assignments to paint, it's a story I can tell you if you wanted to, but I don't actually paint without actual references, so that I could really hone in on who they are, because that's what people want. When they lose somebody that has passed away, they have photographs of the past. Every time they look at them, they remember how they're not with them anymore, because there they were in the past. It's some scene that they remember, and it connects them to their grief. So what I want to do is lift them out of these moments that they remember and put them in the now, because you can't take photographs anymore of people once they're on the other side. So I feel like that's a good place for my skills. But if I really capture them, then they have them with them again in the now. They can look them in the eye and they can say, where, not just where are you now, but how are you feeling, and how do you feel about this towards me? And you get this communication. People find that it's a bridge. They find that there's responses, and everybody responds, feels the responses in their own way. Most of them translate to feelings, like I said. But there's symbolism, there's imagery, there's, all sorts of styles of communication, as you obviously know, since you teach about, these things. But it comes from being on the exact wavelength, really knowing who you're connecting to. So it's the person that you know. And for that, you need an exact likeness. So if I just paint them out of my imagination, I can get an approximation, but I don't get an exact likeness, because I'll color it with my filters, with what I think I see rather than what is really there.
That makes sense. What was the story
Yeah.
you said you could share?
Well, one time I had a dream in which I lived in the Netherlands, as I said, and so my mom actually since moved over here with me, but she left her friends behind in the Netherlands, and one of her friends lost her husband. And it had been 2 years and she was still grieving very hard. And so in one of my dreams, he showed up in my dream and he was like knocking on my awareness saying, can you paint me? Can you paint me? Because I need to get through to my wife. And as you know, communication from spirit is very instant. It's like you get a dump of information and it's up for you to sort it out, right? So when I woke up, I understood why he couldn't get through to her, and I understood the psychology of her and what that grief had done to her, and the grief in this case was stopping her from communicating with him. So she um, wasn't able to pick up on how he was trying to give her comfort. And I ended up painting him. I called my mom and I said, while he came and I could tell that it was him, because that's undeniably clear. Have you got a photo of him? So that's one of those examples I was mentioning. So she gave me a photo of him and I was able to use that to get a really exact likeness. It was really him. And I put him in light, just flaming clear, uh, um, a realm of light out of which he was reaching forward and offering her a butterfly. While I was painting it, I was very much like, oh, the other side's so colorful and everything. So I was trying to add like, because light is light and it was more shades of yellow and bright. And then I was like trying to add all my color in this butterfly. And every time I did, I'd feel this pressure on me that said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I was like, oh, I want to. And I was like, we were like wrestling, right? He was giving me information. Don't do that. And I was like, but I want to. So finally I gave up and I painted it a white butterfly. And it turned out a really beautiful painting. I was happy with it. Well, it turns out that friend of my mom's came and visited here in the United States 2 months after that. I had painted it in advance. She didn't know anything about it. So my mom invited her for just friendship reasons. She came out. And at that point, I could offer her this painting. I said, guess what? I've had a visitation of your husband from the other side. And he inspired me to make a painting. And this is for you, for the healing of your heart. And she started crying. And I said, I feel like I understand why you couldn't connect with him. And so we had a conversation, and here's what it said. And she confirmed that this was true. I said, I felt from him that your conundrum was that if you could connect with him, that in your imagination, he was a stuck soul that was still in earthly vibration and suffering, because our world's kind of bleak right now and it feels heavy. And so she felt that if she connected with him, he was stuck in that heaviness and she didn't wish that for him. So she didn't want to connect with him for that reason. She also wished him to be in the light, in heaven, and really in the glorious realms that we know are part of the afterlife. But she felt that was so other than the world she lived in, that was really far away. And so she wished him in heaven, which was super far away, unreachable. And if she connected with him here, then he was a stuck soul in heaviness, which she didn't want. So you see how that kept her in grief, because she could have resolved that. And I said, he's really trying to get through to you using my awareness to let you know that he's both in the light, in heaven, in a completely resolved place of unconditional love, as all this light shows you. And at the same time, he's all around you. He's not heavy. He's not stuck. He's really available right here, right now, around you. And I told her the story of the butterfly, and she looked at it. She goes, my gosh, for the last 2 months in Holland, in my yard, I have been followed by a white butterfly. And, and it was, butterflies are very sensitive to the vibe, they have a lot of moments. People have a lot of moments, but I had no awareness of this. And I know I picked the butterfly because it's often a symbol of communicating with finer energies from the spiritual realm. But that was me just landing the message. I didn't know that was actually happening to her in Holland. She was being followed by a white butterfly, which was clearly the influence of her lost husband. And so it was a beautiful moment. And I thought to myself, okay, this is just for her, so special. But then I realized that painting itself held the vibration and the promise of you can communicate. Grief is a hindrance to the clear communication, but it's also a language of the body that you have to honor. But it's the same for all of us. We all struggle with that idea. Are the people that we love really free and happy in a heavenly realm? And where is that? Is it all around us or is it far away? So it's a very normal question. And so I ended up putting that painting in the angel deck that we created. I carried it with Karen because I feel that message is something that, that painting created an energy that we can all connect with. And it represents something for all of us. So I felt all of a sudden that I was educated. I was given a gift from that whole experience. It wasn't just for them. It was also just as much for me. So I really treasure those moments.
That's beautiful. Oh, I love that story. So your
Thank
website is
you.
makfineart.com. A
Mhm.
beautiful site. Can people get those cards there, or how would they
Yeah,
best
I
get
have a
the
link on
card
there to order it. I
and the
have
book
to,
too?
yeah, I have to spend a little bit more time at this point to put all the resources from like places like yourself and all of the things that you offer for people
That's
on there so that it becomes more of a throughway so that people can find answers. But at this point, yeah, the angel deck's there, the children's books there, some of my artwork's on there. And definitely, yeah, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to
oh.
hear from people and hear their stories and connect.
In a moment, Marie Antoinette, I'm going to just ask you for some closing words, but I'd like to make a couple of announcements. Why don't you hold up your book one more time for us?
Oh,
Can you
okay.
show us
Yeah,
that beautiful book?
there. And then, maybe some of the pictures on the inside. I don't know if it shows. You can see the colors are kind of flashing by, but I'm trying to do my best to capture the feeling from or the vibration of a heavenly experience. And
Oh,
hopefully you'll find that in the book.
just wonderful, just wonderful. Well, we'll be back to Marie Antoinette in just a moment for just some closing words. But for our listener or our viewer, thank you so much for being here. This is now, hard to believe, episode 403. Also, I have a second podcast called Shades of the Afterlife, which is on iHeartRadio. That's different. That's more of me investigating the afterlife. So within every episode, there could be different topics and things. I really try to stay up with the up-to-date information. That's where you can find a lot about those children's memories and, well, just so much more, just so much more. There's so many scientists involved with the afterlife. For me as a beginner, I didn't think any of this was real. I thought there's no way anybody could prove it. I thought near-death experiences were just our brain shutting down. Science has actually proven that it's not an element of our brain shutting down when we have these extraordinary experiences. Some people are not ready to say what it is, that we can see our loved ones and also many things, but they are working on it. There's so much information out there. Our home base is WeDon'tDie.com. At the bottom of the page, if you want to enter your name and your email address, it says you get a few chapters of my book, but here's the secret. It is the entire book. Grief, the language of grief, all of that is so tough. And that's usually the thing that brings us to looking for evidence of the afterlife. Chapter 10 is how to survive grief. It tells what our bodies do during the grieving process, what's in our control, what's not in our control, things that we can do to feel better, to move through grief in a different way. So many families break up during grief. There's a lot of fighting. So there's a whole world of what happens, why, and what we can do to stay whole and sane, knowing that our loved one is together. And I mention our classes, they're beautiful, and there's so many different varieties, but also we offer a free Sunday gathering, which happens 2 p.m. New York time, whatever that is at where you live. But it's about 90 minutes long. It's filled with inspiration, music videos, fun. And the last 45 minutes or so is a medium demonstration. So each and every week, there are loved ones that come through on behalf of all of our loved ones saying, hey, folks, we're alive. We're real. This is the real thing. So WeDon'tDie.com is our home base for everything. So just use it. I'm there. I'm there. So, Marie Antoinette, I'd just like to go back to you for a moment for some closing words for us.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me because it's been an honor to get to know you and for you to invite me into your circles because I love how you study this and what you find and your humble approach that you don't say I know this, but I at the same time you learn this, you know this from what's out there. I really appreciate you me including in that, or you including me in that, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Any words of advice for a parent right now?
Trust your heart. I think we have within us the map that, and then we just follow the clues. Everyone has their own journey written in their own heart, I believe.
Beautiful, beautiful. Marie Antoinette, you are so filled with joy. I can feel your heart and your love for people from here. Folks,
Thank you.
get the crayons out, whatever that is, creativity for you. Set the phones
Yes,
aside. Everybody,
yes,
go explore. And if you enjoy these
yeah.
shows, press the share button. It doesn't hurt. You never know who in your life may have a big smile on their face and they post happy things on social media, but inside they are suffering. And sometimes just a lighthearted conversation like this that makes such a difference can really impact someone. So be courageous. Press the share button. Remember the beautiful book, Danny's Day in Heaven. It's available on Amazon and wherever you get books. You can also find the link to that and the angel cards at makfineart.com. So, in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is important. So I put the challenge out there for you this week or today. What can you add for a little creativity and get that right brain engaged and maybe open up a new path to communication you didn't know about? So I really want to thank you for listening or for watching, and we'll see you again soon.